I always wanted to start my own business because I worked a lot in tech startups and scale-ups before, like when I was a student, before McKinsey. And then I always said I'd do it at one point, but then McKinsey was really fun and I had really cool clients, so I kept on doing it. And then actually when they said you have to now prepare your promotion to a junior partner, that was a trigger. Because I said, okay, if I do that now,
then you're a lifer.
And then I'm junior partner, and maybe by that time, I did a bit like what women do maybe, but like I want to have kids, and then I don't want to take that risk anymore. So I said, this is the perfect time. So I told them.
So you took an even bigger risk.
It is a risk, and it's a financial risk because we're bootstrapped. So I did, use my savings.
So you've used your savings, you got a grant
We got
from the
grants
Luxembourg government.
and from Europe.
Have you got investors as well?
No.
No.
Not yet.
So you're properly bootstrapped at the
We're
minute.
properly bootstrapped. We didn't give away equity yet. But I do talk to VCs and investors, but more of a, then you know already who we are. I keep you posted. And the moment we're looking to raise, then at least we don't have to start from scratch. Then at least people know already who we are, what we do. But the good thing about if you're in the position to do bootstrapped, you can you keep your freedom. And like we've done a few pivots, and we're now about to test a quite big pivot that we wouldn't be able to do with investors, because they would say like, no, stick to this. We see traction here. Don't do any distraction. So it gives you a bit of freedom.
Who's on the team? Who's your team like? What's the skill set? So you've got 2 data scientists.
Yes.
You have an environmental specialist.
Yes.
You can write code.
Yes.
I've seen you as like a young, talented business person.
Yeah.
And I see you as a bit of a technologist as well. I didn't realise you could code, so maybe I should be seeing
So
you as
saw me as a technologist before you knew I could code.
Yeah. But now maybe I should see you as a technologist first and a business person second. But that's how I see you. I also see you as someone who can sell. I've seen you pitch at events, stand up on stage, hold yourself very confidently. So there's 3 things that I see from the outside, but how do you see yourself?
So I think technologist is logical because I run a tech company, so it's normal that that's what you say, but I wouldn't use that word to describe me because I'm more of a people person. I think that above everything. So I love technology, but I'm really a people person. And I think we met at PI.
Yeah.
I think one good example is...
I tried to talk to you at PI, but like you were like holding court with like 15 people around you, like the first evening.
I set up my own booth.
Yeah, it was just like, you didn't need a booth, did you? You were just like holding court. There's like 15 people hanging off every word. I was like, I'll talk to her tomorrow. So yeah, you're definitely a people person, that's for sure.
No, but yeah, and that's the thing, like people would say like, oh, after this conference, I'm like drained. And for me, it's like the opposite. I'm super extrovert. After like 3 days of conference, I'm like full of energy. I've been talking to people, I've met people. So I think that's more how I would think of myself, rather than a technologist.
I think there's 2 things that you need to be or do as a CEO. You've got to have vision.
Yes.
And you've got to really be the person that energizes people around that vision. So that's probably the core quality that you need to be successful, is like, if you're good with people and you can stand up and you can hold court, once you feel that like you're in that position where you've done a few pivots, you've got the perfect product market fit, you're going to be able to go out there and talk to everybody about it and make it blow up, right? I hope so.
I mean, I did. A good thing is I've seen with my data, it's a very tough thing. If you have a early stage fashion startup, it's not as easy to attract tech talent necessarily, because they're waiting to be, I don't know.
They all want to be in a rocket ship that's like already halfway to the moon, don't they?
That's 1. And 2, they don't feel like it's often men. I mean, there's a lot of super talented tech women, but like I see when I put a job description out, it's like literally 90% or more male applications, I would say. And they feel less linked to fashion. So they would say like, oh, I like the sustainability part of your value proposition, or, oh, I like that it's those complex algorithms that we can work on, but the industry not so much. So that's also something where it's really important to bring over the vision of what we want to do to get people excited.
So think about it from where you are now, when you're developing.
Yeah.
If it was 20 years ago, not even that, if it was 10 years ago, the amount of, like if you were going for investment, so the amount of developers you'd have to bring in,
yes,
the sort of wages that they demand, for you to build something at the kind of scale that you're hoping to build it to,
Yeah.
comparative to now where you can use ChatGPT to build it, your knowledge, your developer's knowledge to check it, the speed you can build something, the cost you can build it at. For anybody else out there looking to start a technology business now where it involves building something, the barrier to entry has just lowered by orders of magnitude that we couldn't have even imagined 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think as it moves on, so like you talk about your brother maybe getting involved in developing and coding, for him to understand it and then not just understand it, but be able to do the prompts and work in tandem with an AI system, I think that's what all developers will have to do.
I agree. I think prompting will be a critical skill in the future.
I think it is.
It's already.
I think it already is.
It will become even more important. So prompting is going to be a key skill in the future. And I think what already for us was huge. Like initially when I had the first idea, we built a no-code tool, very quick, but to get already an understanding of, okay, how should we build the backend? How should it interact with the front end? And have something that we could show to customers from the beginning. And you can now build it in no time.
Yeah. So you're already doing this then? You're already using...
Yes. Yeah, and I even also have Copilot, GitHub Copilot installed in my. I code with the help of AI as well. Sometimes it helps. It saves you so much time.
Yeah.
It knows what you're gonna say, and you need the understanding, in my opinion, still to see like, okay, does this make sense? Because there is some even in Copilot some hallucination. Sometimes it writes code that you did not intend, or it just doesn't work.
Well, I mean, I use ChatGPT just for rudimentary bits and pieces. And
I use it a lot.
It definitely makes things up.
Yeah.
Like I use it for research often. I'm always worried about IP. So if I put something confidential into ChatGPT, where do I stand? Like, might that then get regurgitated with a competitor? How do you handle that?
Yes, very good question. So we have the professional accounts where you can also actually put in the settings that the data that you share is not used for training anything outside of your bubble.
Yeah, and I think it's really key people know that, isn't it?
No, and that's the thing. Like, I think not everyone realizes.
No.
Samsung were initially in the early days of ChatGPT,
they threw in
codes, and then someone else managed to unlock it by asking the right questions.
Yeah,
it's mind blowing, but it shows how important it is.
Yeah, I mean that's really worrying, isn't it?
Yeah.
So 6 years at McKinsey.
Yeah.
And you were loving being there.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, great clients, great projects to work on. You were super happy with what you were doing. I would imagine being at McKinsey, reasonably well paid.
It was
comfortable.
Yeah.
Expense account. Plenty of travel.
Yes, definitely that. Yeah.
What did you hate so much about that perfect life that made you start a business?
I didn't hate it at all. So I think I have to go back to prior to McKinsey. So when I was a student, and also the year before I started working at McKinsey, I always worked in tech startups and scale-ups. And so I really loved that. And I always said, okay, one day I want to start something of my own, but not now because I don't know what I'm going to do.
Right.
And so I'm going to use McKinsey to like come up with ideas. To learn, to like figure out.
Because you wanted to start a business, but you didn't know. It was I want to start a business in this thing. You wanted to build something.
So I worked a lot in fashion. So I did love the fashion sector already. And I worked really hard to get within McKinsey in the apparel, fashion and luxury practice, which I did.
Yeah.
Not straightforward coming from Brussels, where there is no fashion. But
some pretty trendy people from Brussels.
Yeah, but like no companies that we could serve.
There.
No companies that we could serve. And so I just used my experiences. I try to always be like mindful of opportunities. But then I love McKinsey, so I've done it for the 6 years that you mentioned. And initially I did digital projects because I had a technical background, worked at tech companies. And then I worked in fashion, and I started seeing how still siloed the whole IT landscape of a fashion company is. But that's not a business idea. I just thought there's probably something you want to do with that. There's opportunity.
I think there's enormous scope in fashion. I think fashion and retail are so far behind other industries when it comes to technology.
It's crazy, yeah.
It's almost like bordering on arrogance how far behind a lot of companies are. there's very much we've always done it this way, therefore we will always do it that way. And I think you're always struggling between innovation and tradition. And I think it's super important to like hold true to like a core of tradition for a company. But where would we be if we didn't constantly evolve and think of new ways to do things?
No, but someone once said for a creative industry, fashion has been exceptionally non-creative.
When it comes to technology.
And I think that was a very powerful statement.
Yeah.
But for me, the aha moment on like what I wanted to do was really when I started shifting to sustainability projects and working a bit more with, not with the product teams. I was supposed to be working with product teams, but everybody was like, no, you cannot touch them. And that's where I was like, I think here is something that we can do with technology. And I actually decided to quit before I had the concrete idea. I just knew data and product development.
But you've asked lots of questions, haven't you? You've been out to your customers, you've spoke to them.
Yes.
You've figured out where the gaps are. And the thing is, with anything that you're going to do with data, you've got to figure out what are the hard problems people are trying to solve with the data. What information is difficult to come by? What data sets are difficult to put together?
What is a real pain point?
Yeah.
That's another thing. There are opportunities that are maybe not pain points, and then you cannot sell it. No.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So what was the pain point that you found at that point?
Yeah, so the pain point we initially wanted to address, which was rather the opportunity, was the fact that companies are missing out, or fashion brands are missing out on lots of money by not optimizing for gross margins and costs right from the product development stage. And they're also, and especially important now, missing out on opportunities to reduce their environmental footprints. And the reason is because over 80% of the impact of a product is irreversibly set in product development.
Oh yeah, super early.
And yet it's not measured.
No, it's not. So like everyone's got a sustainability plan.
Yeah.
What I see in the data is that there isn't really a massive movement from consumers to spend more on it. So when you talk about like product market fit and there being money at the end of the rainbow, when it comes to products, like what's going to happen? Are companies going to spend more and more money over a period of time to become more sustainable? And by virtue of doing that, bring the cost of sustainability practices down, and then people will just continue to buy things how they always have? Or do you think the consumers eventually are going to get to a point where they're prepared to spend more money because something's sustainable?
So I actually read the State of Fashion, what came out today, the Business of Fashion article. Report that they make every year. And they repeated it. They said like, consumers, much less than expected, are willing to pay a premium for sustainable products. I don't think it's going to change necessarily. So I think companies will have to change and are changing because of compliance reasons. And I think consumers, they respond to things that they can understand. For instance, if there's a backlash of brand X is greenwashing, and that's widely spread, then that potentially impacts the way how they buy. But I don't think the consumer there's no sign, and I don't really see it happening, of them changing into being willing to pay more because something's sustainable.
So really it falls on the brands and tech companies like the one I work for, the one that you own, to innovate, to make it more financially viable to be sustainable then?
Yeah.
In reality?
I think so. And I think, to be very honest, like what we do, and we do, of course, more than only the sustainability, but because we do early stage product optimization, you have to look at sustainability. Today you cannot not look at it if you're optimizing. But what we often find is that you can do incremental improvements that are still significant for a big brand by changing, the composition of a fabric into something that looks and feels the same, but has a 10-15% lower CO2. That then comes up in your reporting. That then actually you see as a lower impact.
But at what point does the company buy that more sustainable product? Does it have to be cheaper? Does it have to be an equivalent price? Will they pay a 10%, 20%, 30% increase? Or like we often see, particularly when we go into high street brands, they're
Yeah.
trying to hit a price point constantly. $24.99, $30.99, whatever that price point is. Do we need to re-educate customers?
I believe it's highly critical that we educate, but I'm not sure how effective it can be, because we have over decades changed the mindset of customers that it's normal to not pay a lot for something, to always have newness. So I think that's it's a difficult.
But fast fashion companies are a fairly new anomaly, aren't they? In the sort of guise of Shein, Temu, in the UK, Misguided, Boohoo, Primark, those fast fashion brands, they've not been around at the sort of volume they are in right now for that long.
But I wouldn't put them in the same bracket. I think, I might be wrong, but I think it was like was it the 90s that like first H&M and Inditex picked up, and and it was very interesting. They came up with a very new business model where like the whole
It wasn't just
time
the two
to market
seasons, it was
got
like
massively
6-week
reduced.
blocks.
Exactly. And then after that, I think in the 2000s something, it was the UK brands, and then they already were named the ultra fast fashion.
Yeah.
Back then that was like, wow, they're even faster. And it's only like in the last, 5 years, or not even 2-3 years, that Shein, Temu...
and they've just come out of nowhere, haven't they, and just had a massive land grab.
They exist for like quite a long time.
Whatever item you type in on Google, they have spent all the money on all the SEO. Like they're pretty difficult to avoid.
They are actually, I talked to them, and it's also like, the way they work is like quite publicly known. By now, multiple articles have covered it, YouTube videos. There are a few things that they also do, controversial thought, that brands can also learn from.
Okay.
Because they have, back to our earlier discussion about not adopting technology, for them it's end-to-end automated. It's crazy. Scraping the internet for trends, translating those into designs, translating designs into tech packs, sending those tech packs to their network of supplier, all of their self-built platform, that then allocates based on a bid.
Yeah.
Not saying anything of whether I approve of this, but this is the way they work. And in parallel, testing on the website how well each design is performing.
I've been trying to have these conversations with my customers about the way the design process works should be akin to how social media marketing works. Constant testing, finding exactly what works, what resonates with customers, and then doubling down on that one thing. Rather than the current process is, let's make a load of stuff, put it in the stores, put it online, and we'll see what sells. So they don't really know if a design's any good in reality until it's been in store for 6 weeks. And then you've bought 30,000 of them, and it's a little bit too late to do anything about it.
And so I think the truth, there is no truth. Every brand has their own brand DNA, right? So if you're more a brand that is like, we always have the latest trends, then I think the way that Shein does things, there's a lot to be learned. I think there is, of course, the risk. In the end, fashion is all about expression, but also about brand DNA. So we cannot have brands all producing the same thing just because it sells, because then you lose the power of fashion.
Yeah.
So I think it's really a bit like, I do love the whole idea of a design, whether it's influenced by trend research or influenced by your creative director vision. I
It's
think
gotta
in
be
a
a bit
few
of
years,
everything though, hasn't it?
in a few years from now, I don't believe in the whole we buy a lot and we just sell and see if it sells. I do believe in the whole batch, test, and add more if we see it sells.
Yeah.
Because it's more sustainable. Back to sustainability.
Sustainable. But I think whichever route you go through when it comes to testing, I think there's got to be some level of testing that's going on. What's your 5-year view on what's going to happen with sustainability? Will we still be having these same conversations in 5 years' time, or do you think there's about to be a big sea change with the legislation that's coming?
So I think the legislations have already set a lot in motion.
Yeah.
I think if you look at the landscape, and I'm talking again from a technological point of view, you have a lot of startups now that really help brands with the traceability piece. Where do my clothes come from? Impact measurement has, in my opinion, a bit be commoditized. There's a lot of startups that can do this, and there's regulations that give guidelines on how to measure it. And then the digital product passport, like all of these things are pretty well covered by a lot of tech players. I think the thing that a bit of a question for me is like right now, sustainability is not really seen as something strategic, or, and that's something we realized, has to be optimized for right from the start. It's more seen as something that is measured, reported for compliance reasons. What I'd love to see is that takes a different role. I am not very sure in the next 5 years that is going to happen. So I was at a really interesting panel. Again, I forgot who said this, but it was really smart. Someone who worked for like a sustainable, relatively sustainable brand, and they were explaining like, you know, we don't market the fact that this is like better made, but we make really beautiful products. We make products that consumers want. And when they buy it, it's sort of like, thanks for buying because of how it looks and it feels and everything. And by the way, we made it sustainable. And I think that is the way forward.
That's a very Steve Jobs, Simon Sinek kind of way of doing things. I like that.
I think otherwise you always will say, oh, well, we made this much better and no. And if consumers don't care anyway, they will cut through. They will not care.
Yeah.
So I think if you make good products.
Yeah. And as part of the process.
And you just behind the scenes make it better.
Yeah.
I think regulations, the role of regulations will also be to make it just impossible for these unsustainable brands to operate at large in the market, to create some level playing field. I don't think brands should necessarily find a way to, you don't buy something because it's sustainable. It's the wrong reason.
If things become more sustainable, if that catches on, customers are prepared to spend a little bit more on those products. Is another positive knock-on effect that more boutique brands will be able to get off the ground because they're not competing against the mass market and the buying power of some of the fast fashion brands?
I suppose. I'm not sure if that really is going to change. No, I don't know. I think it's not really going to.
It won't make any difference. What was the hardest part of starting Athena?
Starting a company is not difficult. You register a company, you have a company. No, I think the hardest.
And then it gets harder from there.
And then it gets harder.
It's an uphill struggle.
Yeah, no, I think the hardest, especially in the beginning, maybe always, but especially in the beginning, you get more no's than yes. So I think it was from the beginning interesting in the sense that like we clearly were on a problem that was like interesting enough for brands to meet me, talk to me. But I think I was used to being very good in what I do. And then what is really hard is when you start getting like in deep discussions, you know, with brands, very concrete about collaborations. And then for an external reason, they decide to move it forward, like not do it yet, or, you know. And when that happens, and I had a period earlier this year, for instance, where multiple of these advancing projects would all, for different reasons, CEO change, like another priority different, like
I had a few of those
a scandal.
Myself,
we had a scandal, one of the brands, and they were like, no new projects. And so all in a very short amount of time. I think then the hardest thing is just to be like, you know, it's not me. We keep pushing and we keep going because, you know, we will find those collaborations.
Yeah, you can kind of sit and sulk for like 10 minutes and then that's it. It's like the tea party's over. You've just got to like carry on, haven't you? Yeah.
And you obviously, I mean, if things went bad at my previous job, then I mean, I'm very competitive and I'm a passionate person, so I want to do things right.
So what was the worst moment and how did you feel in that with all those things going on when it's not quite going according to plan?
But for me, it was honestly the worst moment since starting Athena Studio was actually like the moment that I just said, where I think in a span of 2 weeks, we had 3 big brands that we were like already like we met with the team. We sort of verbally aligned on a scope. So we were gonna start like more like, I don't like the word negotiations. I told you I'm not a good salesperson, but like we were gonna discuss a bit like, okay, so concretely, and the specifics, and all of them fell apart like in the span of 2 weeks. And
how did you pick the team up after that?
So I've made, and I already did it a little bit, but now I've formalized it. I formalized it back then as to celebrate small wins. And it's a tricky balance because you don't want to over-celebrate small wins. You still need to have your eyes on, you know, succeeding.
On the big prize.
But I think it's really important.
But it's every inch counts.
Yes,
in
and there's
there,
stupid things. There was a CIO of like a global multi-brand group that reached out to me on LinkedIn, and I know it's not a win. We're not working with them yet, but the fact that he reached out and said, "Look, I saw this and this. I saw you speaking there, and I think we have an issue that I would love to get your perspective on." Those for me are small wins because they're a start to something that like a few months ago.
Winning a deal starts with the conversation.
Yeah.
So arguably, the most important thing is to start the conversation than signing the contract, because you never get into contract without the conversation.
No, correct. Yeah, so that's what we do now.
So which leaders do you look up to then? When you're in those difficult situations, like where do you pull your inspiration from a leadership point of view?
I think if that's what you mean, if I look a bit like to the world and like people that I would get inspiration from, I actually really like when people are very open about the struggles they had. And so Sarah Blakely is like a very good example of the founder, CEO, leader that I really admire, because she openly talks about when things didn't go well, when she thought it was never going to succeed. And I think that is also something, as a founder now, if a tech startup, you're in this startup ecosystems as well, where people are very fake. People will tell you, in the first 3 months I had this huge client and everything's going great, and nobody openly talks about the struggles they have.
It really is.
And I think that's a weakness, actually, to not.
Yeah, I met with Ginny Bower, who was the CEO of CNA. She talks a lot about vulnerability in leadership as being like a real key pillar of being able to have those really open conversations.
I think it's, again, a bit of a balance. So I'm very open to my team when I'm down. But on the other end, it's like you said, I make sure I say it once and I don't repeat it. Even though I maybe want to repeat it, it's my husband who will hear it. But the team should know that I'm also hurt by something bad that happened or a headwind. But they should also see that the right mentality is to say, but that's fine. We go to the next.
Who's that pivotal person in your life that's got you here? Or not got you here, but has been like a rock that has been an inspiration, like that's been involved in your career in some way? Who is that pivotal person? It's
probably my husband. Because, we were talking earlier, we know each other over 10 years. We met in university. He back then had a startup that they actually built out and sold, a medtech startup. And now I'm the one who started a startup. And I think... Is
he still involved in that, or is it sold and
it's
moved on?
It's sold. Yeah, it's moved on. But he actually, is on the one hand very supportive. So I think this would be much harder if I had someone who,
making all the mistakes for the first time without someone advising.
But also the understanding, of course, when things like being an entrepreneur is highs and lows. So your partner is probably the person who sees most of it, even maybe more than your team. Yeah. And so I'm very lucky with that. And on the other hand, he's also, because of his background, like as an entrepreneur, but also background in computer science, machine learning, he challenges a lot, as well, where I would talk about things that I see, opportunities or challenges, and he would come up with a fresh perspective out of fashion, and it helps me as well.
How often do you say thank you to him for it?
I think I do.
Is there anything that you've not said to him that you wish you'd said to him?
I don't particularly think so. I think I'm quite open in saying thank you. I do think he will appreciate that I mention him here.
Is there anybody else that's been really pivotal in your journey?
So before I joined McKinsey, I did a year of working for a tech startup, from a rocket internet tech startup.
Okay.
It was actually the first job platform in Myanmar. Can't come up with
first
it.
Ever.
So I went for a year to Myanmar. I was the right hand of the country manager.
Cool.
But it was actually with the CEO of that company, because they also had entities in Bangladesh, I think Sri Lanka as well. And the CEO actually inspired me a lot. And so we're still in contact. So he basically later left Rocket Internet. He launched in Singapore a sneaker resale platform.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
So he stayed entrepreneurial. He also sold that. He did really well. And he, for me, he had this he started, I think, his career in banking. You could pull the same. I started my career in consulting. And he was, when I was working there, always very much like, cut the crap, get to what actually matters. He was quite tough on us, but it was definitely someone from whom I picked up quite a few things on running a tech company.
Staying on track.
Staying on track. Don't lose yourself in doing things that in consulting on corporate would work. But remember you're a startup. Remember you only spend time on things that like create value and push you forward.
Yeah. You seem very happy with where you are.
Generally, I am happy. And I think it depends on when you catch me. Like I mentioned, there's highs, there's lows.
Yeah.
We have a few very exciting things going on right now. So you catch me in a high.
Good.
But no, I'm very happy with my choice to be doing what I'm doing.
Oh, that's good. Well, thank you very much for joining me today.
It's a pleasure, Adam.
And making the journey to this beautiful city as well.
Also that is a pleasure. Thanks for having me.